I just put my phone in airplane mode, so we're not going to. I was going to start us off in honor of George Bush visiting this week, and it was relevant to our theme for today. I was going to play what I hope you've all seen, uh, the clip of him trying to do "Fool Me Once, Shame on Me." If you fool me, you can't fool me again. It's a great clip. But you'll just have to imagine it best you can. Okay, so we got some real hits this week. I'm excited to talk about the Gingerbread Man and Little Red Riding Hood. I hope y'all are excited as well. Okay. Um, I always want to offer if anyone wants to try to tell the story. No one, I think we've had maybe one person take us up on what was the story that you gave us? Three Little yeah. Knocked it out of the park. Does anyone feel like they know the story of the Gingerbread Man well enough to say it for the class? If not, you get to hear me just read the story. All right, I'll read it. It's a little lengthy. I'll try to abbreviate it as we go. Once upon a time, in a cozy little cottage, there lived an old woman and an old man. One day, the old woman decided to bake a special treat. Going to make a gingerbread man, she exclaimed. She mixed the dough, rolled it out, and cut it into the shape of a little man. She gave him raisins for eyes, a cherry for a nose, and a row of buttons made from bits of candy. Then she put him in the oven to bake. Soon the kitchen was filled with the delicious smell of gingerbread. The old woman opened the oven door, and to her surprise, the gingerbread man jumped out and ran straight out of the cottage door. The old woman and the old man chased after him, shouting, "Stop, stop, we want to eat you." But the gingerbread man just laughed and called back, "Run, run as fast as you can. You can't catch me. I'm the gingerbread man." The gingerbread man ran through the garden past a cow. The cow mooed, "Stop, stop, I want to eat you." But the gingerbread man just laughed and called out, "I've run away from an old woman and an old man, and I can run away from you. I can." I'm going to skip. Does the exact same thing for a horse, uh, or yeah, from a cow, from a horse, and a hen. The gingerbread man. So first of all, just pause. I'd always heard the story, like I've heard that part of the gingerbread man story where he calls that and he keeps running away. I think I was like in high school when I heard the second half of the gingerbread man story with the fox. Anyways, the gingerbread man was very pleased with himself. "They'll never catch me," he thought. But as he ran along the river bank, he met a sneaky fox. The fox licked his lips and said, "Hello there, little gingerbread man. Why are you in such a hurry?" The gingerbread man replied, "I've run away from an old woman, an old man, a cow, a horse, and a hen, and I can run away from you. I can." The fox, with sneaky smile, said, "Oh, I'm not interested in chasing you, but if you need to cross the river, I can help. Jump on my tail, and I'll carry you across." The gingerbread man thought it over and decided to trust the fox. He jumped onto the fox's tail, and the fox began to swim across the river. As they went deeper into the water, the fox said, "You'd better move to my back so you don't get wet." The gingerbread man did as he was told, but soon the water got even deeper. "You better move to my head," said the fox, and the gingerbread man moved to the fox's head. Finally, as the water reached its deepest point, the fox said, "You better move to my nose so you don't get wet." The gingerbread man carefully moved to the fox's nose. But just as they reached the other side of the river, the fox tossed the gingerbread man into the air, opened his mouth, and snapped. That was the end of the gingerbread man. In, I guess, the original version of the story, the gingerbread man calls out, "I'm half a man. I'm a quarter of a man. I'm gone," which seemed a little morbid to me, as he's being eaten by the fox. Okay. I think as you're reminded of Little Red Riding Hood, you'll think it's even sillier. I was reminded this is a ridiculous story. Yeah, why do you say that about the gingerbread? That they think that they will get him to stop by yelling, "We want to eat you." That's their great plan. As always, what what do we think is significant about this story? What's the point of telling this story besides just being as silly as possible? Okay. So, confident in his own abilities, apparently the fastest gingerbread man you've ever seen. He's the only one that can run, probably. And he thinks this is going to save him. What else? That may be it. We may mine the depths of this story. Okay. What's This is gonna be clever. It's not gonna. Yeah, it's gonna trick him. Do we feel bad for the gingerbread man in this story? I just not. I do like that it's as soon as the oven door is open, he knows I got one thing to do, and then start running. What yeah, is the fox a villain in this story? For one of us, just smarter than the other animals. So you're rooting for everyone. You want someone to eat this gingerbread man real bad. The fox is the.
She wants it's her.
Yeah.
Is it like because the gingerbread man is like a little snarky, it's like I can't catch you.
Yeah. If we change the recurring line to "Help me, everyone's trying to eat me," would we feel okay? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I messed up the story when I took that out. Okay. So this may have backfired on me a little bit because I think, especially for where we're going, I want you to feel a little bad for the gingerbread man. Because it's only if we feel bad for the gingerbread man that we think that the foxes tricked him and done something malevolent, that we would start to draw out of this story that there's a danger in being tricked, that we are like that you sympathize with the gingerbread man, you want to avoid being tricked, and there are people out there who are trying to trick you. Speaking of, let's move on to Little Red Riding Hood. Who feels confident enough in this story? I feel like this is, besides maybe the Three Little Pigs, this has got to be our most famous story that we do. When was the last time someone thought about the story of Little Red Riding Hood? Was that in? We could have done that instead of class today. I've done a better use of our time. Anyone brave? Okay, I didn't write this one down because I was hoping I would just remember it. Okay, so Little Red Riding Hood starts with something. Shout at me, just scream if I get this wrong. So it starts with the mom saying, "Hey, take some food to your grandmother," right? So it begins. Okay, so Little Red Riding Hood, little girl, little red hood and cape, she starts walking through the forest to her grandmother's, and she meets a wolf along the way who asks her where she's going. She says, "I'm taking this food to my poor grandmother." And the wolf is very nice and then figures to himself that he could eat this girl and he could eat the old woman if he can trick her. So he suggests to the girl that she should go pick some flowers to take to her grandmother. That gives him enough time to run on ahead to the grandmother's house. And I think that he like tricks her into letting him in, maybe pretends that he's Little Red Riding Hood. but she lets him in, and then he eats her whole. That's my favorite part of the story. She just swallows her whole. But then, eventually, Little Red Riding Hood gets there, and she sees the wolf in her grandmother's bed with a bonnet on, dressed up like her grandmother. And she sees that something's odd, but she can't tell that it's a wolf in a bonnet. And she says, what great ears you have, or what big ears you have. And the wolf says, oh, all the better to hear you with, my dear. What big eyes you have. Oh, all the better to see you with, my dear. And then, did I already mess this up? Oh, yeah, what big, say it again? Something about, that would make sense given the snout. What a big nose you have, all the better to smell you with. I'm just improvising here. And then what big teeth you have, all the better to eat you with. And then, and this is where I've heard it, read it, seen it in different ways, where sometimes it just ends with the wolf jumps out and eats her whole, and that's the end of the story. I feel like we could have had an entire class about like alternate endings to all of these different stories. In fact, that kind of ties in with your class. We've done Noah and Lot, where a lot of the times we have a story about Noah and Lot, and we leave off other parts of their story, the ending parts of their stories. But an alternate ending for Little Red Riding Hood that I imagine a lot of us are familiar with is the woodsman comes in and cuts open the wolf, and then the grandma and Little Red Riding Hood escape, shaken up but unharmed from the digestive process of this wolf. I remember I was reading about, like when I was making the class like a month or so ago, I was reading that there's a version of this story where the woodsman like tricks the Little Red Riding Hood and Grandma are dead in this version of the story. They're not coming back, but he like tricks the wolf into like eating stones, and then the wolf tries to run away, but it's too slow, and then it like falls into a well. Real weird stuff. Okay. Did that sound mostly right with our different alternate endings for Little Red Riding Hood? What's going on in this story? Why would this be one of the most famous stories for children that we'll discuss this entire class? Don't talk to strangers. Is this an important lesson for children? I would think so. What else? I think you laughed when you said that. I think that is legit. That's got to be like the number one reason that you tell this story. Yeah. Yeah. Careful who you trust. Yeah, that's a lesson that we all need to hear. As soon as she saw that nose is unusually large. Looks like a canine's nose. Yeah. Is it easier to sympathize with Little Red Riding Hood in this story than the gingerbread man? We all. This is actually how we divide the classes: heartless people and empathetic people, and Mickey somewhere in the middle. Yeah. This has very little to do with like where we're going with the class, but I am interested. Is there a reason you think that this story in particular has caught on as like a very famous story? Is it because it's such a useful parenting story, or is there something about it? Yes. lot of anti-wolf propaganda out there. Okay, we're going to come back to that idea later. Not just about girls, but about innocence. Yeah, it's a little less ambiguous than some of our other stories. And I think there's the gingerbread man story. I mean, particularly the famous part of the gingerbread man story that I was familiar with. You have these great lines, these repeated lines. Can't catch me, I'm the gingerbread man. And then here, especially the end of Little Red Riding Hood is just, I don't know, I assume there's some meter in just that name. But then the final bit, what great eyes you have. Teeth you have. Okay. I think in both of these stories, we have this idea of being tricked, but there's also on the reverse side. So it's very clearly a story about these tricksters, a fox and a wolf, and how these are bad actors. But I think that on the other side of things, why you would tell this story is you want to warn small children about these bad actors. And so the reverse side of being tricked is being naive and maybe even being innocent. Again, we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And so that's really the idea that I wanted us to get at this morning, is a warning about being naive in the world. So with that said, what are some biblical stories that we can think of that either mirror these stories about tricksters or about being naive in some other sense that y'all can think of? Stay on it. Yeah, that's what we're going to spend a lot of time talking about. Adam and Eve being tricked by the serpent. Yeah. Yes. We'll talk more about it, but Eve in particular, because she's the main person talking, presumably Adam because he's standing there, they seem naive in a lot of ways. They don't know what nakedness is. Anyways, what else? Jacob. What's his trickiest story?
Probably the trickiest story is when he convinced his father to use Esau to get the blessing.
Yeah.
So he was. That's true. That is true.
Yeah, both of the early stories with Esau, very tricky. What else? Samson. Oh, so he's the naive one here. Yeah. Half my hair's gone. What else? Any other tricksters that we can think of? Yeah, Tamar's. Yeah. Is Judah naive in the story, or is other? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Laban tricking him. Yeah, lots of. There's a lot of good trickster stories in the Bible. Who's the Gibeonites? Is that right? With the bread, the moldy bread. One story that I thought would be worth our time is 1 Kings 13. Is that right? Yes. Anyone willing to read for us? Okay, so I'll just have you read 11 through 25. To save us some time, 1 Kings 13, verses 1 through 10, is this prophet shows up and is trying to, what's the word? Rebuke, correct Jeroboam. And he gives this prophecy from God and involves the withering of Jeroboam's hand and then healing it and making this prediction about what's going to happen to this altar that Jeroboam has set up to false gods. So anyways, the prophet is vindicated, shown that this is in fact a message from the Lord, this nameless prophet that we encounter out of Judah. All right, so after he does this, he leaves and he specifically goes in a different direction from where he came so that he doesn't, because he's just sort of made a fool of the king and sort of made enemies with people in power. He's trying to avoid getting killed afterward. So he does all this with the king and then he leaves in the opposite direction. Then we pick up in verse. And before you start reading, does anyone have a section heading right here above verse 11? What section headings do we see around here? Prophet's disobedience. Do we see anything else? Say it again. Death of the man of God. Okay. Yeah, those are two very different. I mean, they're not that. All right, go ahead and read from verse 11 to 25.
Now an old prophet lived in Bethel, and his sons came and told him all that the man of God had done that day in Bethel. They also told to their father the words that he had spoken to the king. And their father said to them, "Which way did he go?" And his son showed him the way that the man of God who came from Judah had gone. And he said to his son, "Saddle the donkey for me." So they saddled the donkey for him, and he mounted it. And he went after the man of God, and found him sitting under an oak. And he said to him, "Are you the man of God who came from Judah?" He said, "I am." Then he said to him, "Come home with me and eat bread." He said, "I may not return with you, or go in with you, neither will I eat bread nor drink water with you in this place. For it was said to me by the word of the Lord, you shall neither eat bread nor drink water there, nor return by the way that you came." And he said to him, "I also am a prophet as you are. And an angel spoke to me by the word of the Lord, saying, Bring him back with you into your house, that he may eat bread and drink water." But he lied to him. So he went back with him and ate bread in his house and drank water. And as they sat at the table, the word of the Lord came to the prophet who had brought him back. And he cried to the man of God who came from Judah, "Thus says the Lord, because you have disobeyed the word of the Lord and have not kept the commands the Lord your God commanded you, but have come back and have eaten bread and drunk water in the place of which he said to you, Eat no bread and drink no water, your body shall not come to the tomb of your fathers." And after he had eaten bread and drunk, he saddled the donkey for the prophet whom he had brought back. And as he went away, a lion met him on the road and killed him. And his body was thrown into the road, and the donkey stood beside it. The lion also stood beside the body. And behold, men passed by and saw the body thrown in the road, and the lion standing by the body. And they came and told it in the city where the old prophet lived.
Yeah, that's the rest of this doesn't matter. I mean, it matters. It's a chapter in the Bible. I love the stories this week. They're all kind of ridiculous. If I'm reading verse 21 right, I'm very much picturing it like a scene from The Exorcist, where he's eating with this guy, and then the word of the Lord comes to him, and he just yells out to this person in the middle of the meal, "Thus says the Lord, because you have disobeyed." And then you get this great image at the end of like a lion attacks a guy and then it just stands by the body instead of like eating it, and a donkey standing there too. Yeah. First of all, the story is a little, it's weird beyond like the obvious ways in which it's weird. It's difficult to read because you get these two nameless prophets and you have to figure out who's talking and individual scenes. But did y'all follow what happened here? Are we familiar with this story? It's one that we don't spend a whole lot of time with. It's a very strange account. Do we feel bad for the prophet from Judah, the one who dies? Do we feel bad for him? Tell me your name. Caleb. Caleb, you were the one who had as your section heading the prophet's disobedience. Does this seem like a story? This is for everyone. Does this seem like a story about disobedience to y'all? Sure. Yeah, I know we didn't read the part before this, but isn't the assumption that this prophet has come and he's spoken to Jeroboam and these other, whoever else he's talking to, and they're supposed to believe him simply because he is claiming that he speaks for the Lord. And then he has some signs that he shows, but this guy also has his prophecies fulfilled, namely this guy getting eaten by a lion, or killed by a lion. So, yeah, it's not clear to me. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, if I'm reading this story in the wrong way. But it very much seems like this guy makes pretty honest mistake here in thinking, oh, someone else. There are other prophets apparently. In fact, in verse 11, the old prophet he's introduced as a prophet. We're supposed to assume this guy is legitimate, and he comes and says, "Hey, God told me that you're supposed to come back with me and eat and drink and go this way." And yes, that's contradictory to what you heard before, but we could sit here for a few minutes and think of stories where God changes God's mind and gives differing commandments than God has given in the past. Someone tell me why this is an okay story. Why I shouldn't be frustrated with this. Yeah, pressure's on, man. You have to defend the story.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking, it's not a very good fit. Because, but I mean, this one about Chelsea, harvest without working, without like the actual conversation.
Sure. Yeah, to be fair, before we move on from the story, probably the orthodox thing for us to do is to assume God is just in this story, even if it's not terribly clear to me how.
It seems to me, if the word of the Lord comes to you, maybe if somebody walks up and says, the word of the Lord told me the opposite of that, it seems like maybe you might at least ask.
Yeah.
Check with the Lord.
This is something that he can do.
Hey, did you change your mind about this?
Yeah, so in that case, does this seem more like a test than anything? Because we do see that God vindicates the second prophet's prophecy. So it seems like God is on his side as well. So why the whole incident to begin with of him coming up and giving this new commandment? Is it like, does that seem reasonable that this is like a test from God to make sure that he follows through on what he's supposed to do?
I feel like we're at an unfair advantage because it's in the end of verse 18 it says that he lied to him. And obviously this is a lie.
Yeah.
The prophet, the man of God from Judah, did not know he was being lied to. And so I think that's a really that's a human condition. How do you know you're being lied to? When do you know you're being lied to? So then it goes back to like if you've been hearing from the word of God, like directly from the word of God, then yeah, I don't know. How do you trust other people who also say that they've been talking to you?
That is also just a really great dramatic line. But he lied to him.
I can't believe Jesus in the temptation too, because Satan comes to him, he actually tells him the truth. You jump off this one and you hit your face, that Jesus knows enough that he should know that this is confident that he has this activity and he could do.
Yeah. Last comment on this, then I want to shift.
Yeah, well, I think that part of life you so much with heading because of obedience to be why God places. But you're not told like, hey, God sent this lion right there because he disobeyed. The prophecy could have been, hey, I know there's a lion here, and you go back this way, so why don't you just wait, like not go back to
Yeah.
God bringing you. And so it's less about like being punished for not listening to God and more like listening to God.
Yeah.
Especially in this empathy, because these guys are not self-esteem, but like
Yeah. What was the section heading that you had? Death to the Man of God. So yeah, the section headings definitely prime us in one direction. And it does seem like, I think the best reading, like in the spirit of the text that Robin is pointing us to, does involve reading the second prophet, the old prophet from Bethel, more akin to like a Satan character, like Jake was saying, that it's someone that is proven correct in some sense. It says some things that are true, but is a bad actor. Okay. For the last bit of class, I want to focus on the fall narrative, Genesis 3, Adam and Eve. We're not going to read it because I think we're all pretty familiar with the story. Sorry. In the story, you have the serpent speaking to Eve and presumably Adam, says some things that are maybe true or half truths, maybe adding some things, Eve adding some things. But there's this exchange between them where the serpent is cunning and tricky, and Eve and to some extent Adam are easily manipulated, and then this leads to eating the fruit, the fall humankind. I think, to my mind, y'all can disagree, but not now, that the best way of interpreting this story is that there is a parallel here with that we should read Adam and Eve as children, not literal children, but they have like the minds, the souls of children in some sense, namely that they are immature and they are naive, and then what they want is the knowledge of good and evil, and we should read that as maturity. It's no coincidence that part of what comes with maturity is their recognition of their nakedness. And this parallels, in some sense, sort of a sexual awakening, puberty, that children go through. This is a part of maturing. It's also no coincidence that when we talk about like the age of accountability, we're typically thinking of an age where children are going through puberty. And so there's this maturing, this awakening that's going on. So the question that I'm spending the last few minutes on is, it's a constellation of questions. Is there a difference between naivete and innocence? Going back to Mickey's comment from earlier. And are we supposed to want to be innocent? Obviously, in the back of my mind here, we have stories like little children come to me. But then contrasted with something like Paul's statement, when I was a child, I spoke like a child, but now that I'm a man, I put away childish things. Yes. So, yeah. Okay, so first of all, I think just from that quote, do we think, is there a difference between being naive and being innocent? Mostly nodding. What's the difference here? Presumably we're supposed to avoid one, but then the other one is good. Innocence is good. Naivete is bad. Does that sound fair? What's the difference between these things?
Naive might be like lack of wisdom in a sense, and then innocence is having maybe the wisdom to not take
Okay, I like that. So, innocence, maybe you recognize some of your boundaries, what knowing what you don't know, maybe.
Innocence is form of one.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wonder if naivete is in our mind that it implies some willful refusal to learn, willful non-discerning.
Yeah. There's something you haven't done what you ought to have done in this circumstance. How do we think about the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that fruit being forbidden? Isn't that a good thing? In every other place in the Bible where it talks about the knowledge of good and evil, it's a good thing. It's only in this one circumstance where they're not, this is a bad thing, that we want to not eat this fruit.
because in the first instance, I don't know, but in the first instance, it is
So I assume you would want to go further than, like, it's just, this would be fine, but it happens that this fruit also kills you. But you would want to go more than that, wouldn't you? Maybe? Think about it. All right.
I think in one sense, after Adam and Eve eat the fruit, sort of stage has been broken on the knowledge of good
Yeah.
and evil.
That's a
And then
great metaphor.
the Bible deals with where we are now, sort of. But I think also, I'm not sure that the knowledge of good and evil was the bad thing in the story of Adam and Eve.
Okay, so
I think the bad thing was that God said, "Don't eat this," and they didn't. It was the disobedience,
yeah,
not the actual knowledge of good and evil.
like the prophet's disobedience. All comes back.
I feel like, yeah, I agree. Like, I don't think that the knowledge of evil in itself is bad. I would, in the head, ask about like why it was not such an why it wasn't
Yeah.
but I think we're giving the knowledge of evil to God, and that doesn't have any that circumvent God. It's more disobedience, like rebellion.
Any last
I
comment?
think it has a lot to do with human desires, what we decide is good.
Yeah.
And the culture we are growing up in, where these people want to decide you're evil if you believe this is evil. So many things that are being present on that we know from the Bible are evil.
Yeah.
And now we're told that we're evil because we think
We have time. I think this is basically in agreement with these comments that have been made. That it seems to me that what's at stake in the fall narrative is simply a problem of timing. It's to use our child metaphor, it's growing up too fast. It's grasping for independence when we're not ready. So the alternative to this on the reverse side is that maturity is recognizing when we don't know our way about, when we don't know what we're doing, and that we should be relying on someone else, in this case, on God. Last comment. Fine. Have you been formulating that this whole time?